Our first reading is from UU Minister Paul Razer's book, Faith Without Certainty. Liberals want to create a strong and inclusive community, but we often want to do it without giving up anything, without letting down the barriers we erect around ourselves in the name of individual autonomy. We wade into the waters of community up to our knees, but we're afraid to let go of the dock and plunge in with our whole bodies. Like Linus, who in a famous Peanuts cartoon remarks, "I love mankind, it's people I can't stand." We liberals are often better at formality and abstraction than at getting our hands dirty and our feet moving. We sincerely want things to be right in the world, but we also want them to be tidy. Both justice work and community are often messy, and our discomfort with messiness weakens the prophetic power of our words and actions. And our second reading is from Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron's book, Welcoming the Unwelcome. We can begin to prepare for the future by asking ourselves a few questions. What will I do and how will I be when unwanted events occur? Will I be able to maintain a steady mind and a kind heart that can accommodate whatever pain arises and therefore benefit myself and society rather than be a hindrance? How will I react to illness, to devastating loss, to insult and disrespect? What about when things get worse in the environment or in politics? Will I freak out and erupt in hatred, fear, or self-condemnation? Or will my practice allow me to be with what I'm feeling and proceed sanely and humanely? Will adversity bring out my basest qualities, or will it bring out my best ones?
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a soul like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see.
So Jonah had himself a perfectly satisfactory life, a comfortable life as these things go 800 years before the birth of Christ, who wasn't on Jonah's mind at all, more than likely. A prophet of God preaching in the northern kingdom of Israel, he had things pretty well figured out. He loved his God, and he told his fellow Israelites that they too should love and honor their God. That is a prophet's job, after all. He knew who his people were, and he knew who his people's enemies, and, according to him anyway, the enemies of God were. Especially the Ninevites in the kingdom of Assyria, an empire just to the north, filled with wicked people who had turned away from God and threatened Israel. So, I'm no biblical scholar, but I picture things going pretty smoothly for Jonah. He knows what is right and what is wrong. He knows, maybe more importantly to him, who is right and who is wrong. And he has God's message to share. And then, one day, Jonah's just hanging out at home, maybe working on his next fiery sermon, when God checks in. Now, we don't have the official transcript, but I think maybe it went more or less like this.
Jonah!
Oh, wow, hey, God, yeah, I was just working on a little something here. Tell the people about how great you are and all.
Yes, well, that's good. That's good. But I have a mission for you.
A mission? Sure, great. All right, mission. Lay it on me.
I've been thinking about the Ninevites.
Hey, me too. In fact, that's what I was writing about. Hate those guys. I mean, just the other day, I prophesied that God, that you would destroy them.
And I want you to go to their great city and tell them to turn from their wicked ways, that they may be saved from destruction.
Right, but, and hear me out on this, what if they listen to me? Because then they won't be destroyed.
That would point.
Yeah, but look, it's just that, they're the Ninevites. And, I just told everybody you were going to smite them and everything, and I'm supposed to be a prophet, and that's a prophecy, and so now, and God, hello? Huh. So, Jonah sprang into action, packed his bags, gathered up some coin, booked passage on the first boat he could find, sailing as far away from Nineveh as he possibly could because he was not going to go help them be saved. Here's the thing, though, when you're a prophet of God. God notices. And so God sent a storm to toss the boat around. But Jonah was so comfortable in his decision to not help the Ninevites save themselves, to not save them from utter destruction, that he just curled up below decks while this boat is getting thrown around and the sailors who live on the ocean are terrified for their lives. And he just goes to sleep. Until the crew finally figure out that this guy is the problem. That it's his fault that God is tossing their little boat around. And so they solve the problem by throwing him overboard. And the seas are calmed immediately. But don't worry about Jonah. Before he could drown in the middle of the Mediterranean, God sent a big fish. Possibly a whale. We don't have pictures. Sent the big fish to swallow him. And there, Jonah lived for 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a big fish until he prayed for deliverance and promised, "Fine, God, I'll go to Nineveh." Good enough for God, apparently. God told the fish to spit Jonah out on dry land. And Jonah went to Nineveh, and he marched across the city, crying out, "Repent! 40 days more, and Nineveh shall be overthrown." What happened? Exactly what Jonah was afraid was going to happen. They listened. The king and the people of Nineveh declared a fast. Everyone, the king said, must put on sackcloth. Even the animals, who I imagine said, "Hey, what did we do?" And the Ninevites turned away from their evil ways and the violence in their hands. So God did not bring down destruction on the city, which really ticked Jonah off. "This," he told God, "is exactly why I got on that boat in the first place. I knew you were gracious and merciful and abounding in love, and that you would welcome these people into your grace if they changed." I don't like it. I told everybody you were going to destroy them. Now I look like I don't know what I was talking about. I'd rather be dead. And he marched out of the city to sit in the sun and sulk. The Bible doesn't say sulk, but I'm pretty sure it's implied. And then God, seeing Jonah sitting in the blazing sun, made a bush grow to give him shade and save him from his discomfort. And Jonah was happy about that bush. Then God, being apparently a prankster, sent a worm to make the bush wither away. And Jonah got mad about the destruction of that bush, to which God said,
Really? You're worried about the bush, which you did nothing to grow and was around for no more than a day? Should I not be concerned about Nineveh, that great city in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know their right hand from the left, and many animals?
And that is where this biblical story ends, leaving Jonah and us, the reader, to ponder an unanswered question. A question about what matters and why. Now, on one level, the story of Jonah is a story about the Ninevites. And that story, the moral that no one is beyond redemption, that no one has just a simple, single story, that we are all complex beings. That story still matters. I'm reasonably certain there will never come a time when it isn't a story that matters. I'd love to be wrong about that. But if we make this just a story about Nineveh, about the other, we're missing a deeper message. Because Jonah's story is also, I would say, mostly about Jonah, and through him, about us. About welcoming uncomfortable ideas, disruptions to the settled patterns of our lives, the settled patterns of our beliefs, our certainty, our comfort, about confronting the question of who we think we are. In Jonah's case, a messenger of God's hope and grace and love. And finding out we may not quite be there. And the theme for this service, welcoming the unwelcome, comes from Pema Chodron's book about bodhicitta, a Buddhist term for the mind awakened to the wisdom to have compassion for all beings, to working toward a world in which everyone is free from suffering. Such compassion, she writes, requires us to see the world, to see ourselves as we are. Only by welcoming in sometimes unpleasant truths can we address them. Chodron doesn't pretend that that is easy. She even calls it in one of the chapters, in fact, it is the title of a chapter, Mission Impossible. And she says that the first, maybe the biggest challenge, the biggest reason that it may in fact be a mission impossible, is that this bodhicitta wish to spare everyone suffering, it has what Chodron calls a no exceptions clause. We might call it the universalist clause. Whatever we call it, that's the clause Jonah was fighting against when he got on that boat. And he was still fighting when he marched out of the city to sulk in the desert. He's not alone. Take a moment. We can all picture our Ninevites. Right now, sitting here, I bet a bunch of us probably have more or less the same picture. And we have good reason to be angry with them, to be distrustful, maybe even, like Jonah, to be hateful. Our Ninevites are hateful, and we hate them for it. Jonah wanted his anger satisfied. He had prophesied that his enemy, what he thought was God's enemy, would be destroyed. He wanted to be right, to be vindicated. And God asked him, "Really? Is that what matters?" We may not believe or think that it is God asking that question, or that God is there to do anything at all. But the questions remain, rooted in our faith and our values, in a spiritual discipline of love. Now, mind you, disciplined love is not a mindless love, a everything's okay, have a hug love. If we are going to welcome the difficult idea that all people, even the Ninevites, deserve to be free from suffering, we also have to make space for the unpleasant truth and reality that lots of people are choosing to inflict suffering. That evil is done. That there is sin, however we care to define it. As one Buddhist writer put it, we don't serve anyone by pretending those people are not out there causing harm. As long as we remember we might be doing some of it too. But we can instead adopt an attitude toward them of, I love you, but no. Doing whatever we can to stop them, still wishing for them to find well-being and ease. There's compassion in that approach, but also, honestly, just straight up pragmatism. As Chodron points out, people who are truly freed from suffering aren't lashing out and hurting people. Now look, maybe, as Chodron said, it is a mission impossible. Fine. I think this universalist faith that we share challenges us to accept that mission anyway. But there's another message I'd like to draw from Jonah. And I'll admit, I'm stretching the biblical story a bit here. But I think there's a lesson not just about our own reactions to the hated other, but also a lesson about how we respond to the new or the different other. What might Jonah have learned from the Ninevites if he hadn't marched out of the city when they turned back to God? How might his vision of truth, of goodness, of beauty been expanded if he had invited the Ninevites to share their own? I quoted Friedrich Schleiermacher in the meditation this morning, the father of liberal theology. In his writing that each of us is a compendium of humanity. That all of us are the whole of humanity lives in each and every one of us. In some ways, that's a warning. That if we look, we will find in ourselves the very same hate, the anger, the arrogance, the apathy that we despise in others. But it is also a blessing, a promise that other people, the whole of humanity, also contain wonders and possibilities and hopes and loves. And we can find some pieces of beauty from them in ourselves. We are each only a tiny piece of humanity. But so too are we reflections of its whole? To see that reflection, though, calls us to welcome the new and the different other. To truly welcome them, to invite them to be part of our community by making it their community too. That means, to paraphrase Reverend Racer from this morning's reading, to let down the barriers we've erected around our idea of who we are and how we do things. It isn't a strong and inclusive community if we invite people to join it on our terms. As Racer challenges us, we have to be prepared to give things up, to change, to grow, to let things get messy and difficult, because that's when they get interesting. Not just wade in the waters of community, he says, but plunge in. Not endure newness or change, but encourage and embrace it. Little red-haired Tilda, she got it. Mostly. Her world shifted on her. No warning, no explanation. And then she let a ladybug show her that she could enjoy a new perspective. That she could stack building blocks upside down, lie on the ceiling and read her favorite funny book. If she tried, she could cope with the changes. I'm asking a little more than that of us. Not just to cope with something new, but to invite it in, to seek it out, to give it space to change who we are, how we see the world, what it means to be this or any religious community. How we church. To learn to go to the opening hymn, to learn new names for God, for the sacred, for the ground of being that connects us all in that interdependent web. What will that look like? I have no idea. And isn't that great? Not knowing could be the best part. If we can, in the words of our chalice lighting, listen for the moving of the creative and powerful life force whispering, be quiet. I am not through with you yet. Amen. And may it be so.